Year 5, and welcome to our final English lesson of the week. So what I'd like to do is open up your books for me, write today's subject, which is English, our LO, which is to make predictions, and our today's date, which is Friday the 29th of January. Okay, so what we're going to do today, first of all, is we're going to have a look at the front cover of our book. So here it is, The Adventures of Odysseus. This is the new book that we started yesterday. And here is our front cover. And now just looking at this front cover, I want you to now write into your books for me, okay? What you think the book might be about, just based off the front cover and the prologue that we looked at yesterday. Who do you think the character is? So who do you think this person here is on the front cover? Okay, and what do you think he will do in the book? What do you think this character is going to do in the book, and why do you think this? Okay, so it might be something to do with what he's wearing. It might be something to do with the title. Okay, it might be to do with the background scene. It's entirely up to you. It's your prediction. It's your guess. You can write what you think might happen. Okay, so write the answers to these questions into your books for me, please. Okay, so you should have paused the video and given that a go. And now we're going to move on. Okay, so at the beginning of every chapter, we have a picture in our book. So here's the picture in the book just before chapter 1. Okay, so you don't have to do any writing or anything, but I just want you to have a little think to yourself, looking at the picture, who do you think this might be? Okay, so have a think maybe about the prologue, okay? And what do you think they're doing in the picture? What is she doing? Okay, so have a little think to yourself, and now I'm going to read through the chapter whilst you think, and maybe think of some more ideas as I read. Okay, make sure you're following along with me. I've put the slides, the pages on the slides for you. So chapter 1, The Stranger. 9 long years had passed since that great and terrible victory. 9 summers and 9 winters had passed, and on the island of Ithaca the people were still waiting for the return of their king, for Odysseus had not come home from the Trojan War. Every day his wife Penelope looked out over the restless sea, wondering whether he was dead or alive. Every day his son Telemachus, who had been a baby when the war began and was now 19 years old, wondered whether his father's body was rolling somewhere deep beneath the blue waves. The island was in a state of chaos. It had been without a king for 19 years. Suitors had invaded Odysseus's feasting hall, a motley company of princes, warriors, merchants, and chancers trying their luck. All of them were hoping to win Penelope's hand in marriage and trying to persuade her that Odysseus was dead. But Penelope refused to believe them. She clung to the slender hope that somewhere in the wide world he was still alive. She had told the suitors that she would only choose a new husband when she had finished wearing a shroud for Odysseus's father. Every day she sat working at the loom, but every night, by the light of the moon, she unravelled all that she had woven during that day. So the shroud was never finished, and the suitors waited, passing the time by drinking Odysseus's wine, slaughtering his cattle, flirting with his maidservants, and mocking his memory. Meanwhile, on another island, a stranger was staggering out of the sea. His hair and beard were tangled and matted with salt. His whole body was caked with brine. Half dead with exhaustion, he crawled on his hands and knees across the sand. He made his way to a grove of trees and buried himself beneath the leaves scattered on the ground. He closed his eyes and fell instantly into the sweet, oblivious balm of sleep. It was the daughter of the king of that island who found him. Her name was Nausicaa. At first she thought the stranger was dead, but when she cautiously reached down and touched his arm, it was warm. She shook his shoulder and woke him. She fetched him a cup of water and a piece of cloth to cover his nakedness. She led the stranger to her father's place. She showed him a room where he could wash himself, and she sent the servants to bring him clothes. As soon as he was alone, the stranger sponged himself from head to foot, washing the salt from his skin. He rubbed oil into his shoulders, necks, and arm. He dressed himself in the fine clothes. The Princess Nausicaa led him to her father's bronze-floored feasting hall. King Alcinous was sitting on the throne. He looked the stranger up and down. "Sit down, eat, drink," he said. Meat, bread, wine, honey cakes, barley meal, and water were served. Gratefully, the stranger sat at the table and ate. He ate for a long time, where at last his raging appetite had been satisfied, and he was sitting back in his chair and wiping the crumbs from the corner of his mouth. King Alcinous said, "There is food for the body, and there is food for the soul. Stranger, now that you have eaten, sit back and listen. My storyteller will entertain and enrich you with a story." The doors of the hall were thrown open, and an old blind storyteller was led into the hall. He stared in front of him as though he was piercing into a world nobody else could see. His eyes yellowy white and swollen with cataracts. He lifted his lyre to his shoulder and started to play. He threw back his head and burst into song. I sing of the bronze scaling gates of the city of Troy. I sing of those bronze gates swinging open and the mighty Trojan army riding out, with a whirring of wheels and a creaking of chariots, with a neighing of horses and a shouting of men, with a thundering of hooves and marching feet. I sing of Prince Paris, his cloak billowing behind him, his sword hungry for the saviour of blood. I sing of the Trojan army pouring across the plain, and I sing of the clash of bronze against bronze as the Trojan army meets the Greeks, like two rivers in full spate, each with its flotsam of uprooted trees crashing into one another. And I sing of the Greek heroes, mighty Achilles severing heads with every stroke, nimble-witted Odysseus trailing a wake of the dead, and old Nestor fierce among his foes. Stop! King Alcinous put his hand on the old man's shoulder. Stop, stop, our guest, he is weeping. His face is buried in his hands, his shoulders are shaking. Stranger, who are you? Why does this story bring such grief? The stranger lifted his head and looked at the king, his cheeks wet and glistening with tears. King Alcinous got up from his throne and seized one of the stranger's hands. Nobody, whether of high or low degree, goes nameless in this world. Tell us who you are. We will listen to your story and learn, and I will send one of my high, proud ships to take you to the place that you are seeking. The stranger looked into the king's face. He looked at the old storyteller and the princess. Then he slowly drew himself up to his full height, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Sorry if you weren't following that. That's my bad. I do apologize. We're just at the top of the page now. I have used many names, but the name by which you would know me is Odysseus. To hear this story fills me with emotion. It fills my eyes with tears to hear the name of my friend Achilles, whose bones now lie under Trojan sand. But to hear myself described as a hero, a man of honor, makes me want to laugh. I remember the day when I first heard that red-haired Menelaus, king of Sparta, was mustering an army to fight against Troy. It was the very day my wife Penelope gave birth to our son Telemachus. When I held that child in my arms, everything changed. Suddenly I had no desire to sail across the sea and risk my life for the sake of another man's wounded pride. So when Menelaus' lieutenant arrived on the shore of my island, I was not there to meet him. I was met by my wife, the baby in her arms. She told me that the lieutenant, that I had gone mad. She led him to a beach where he found me, my face streaked with dirt, my hair in greasy ringlets, and my clothes no more than filthy rags. I had harnessed a donkey and an ox to a plough. I was ploughing the shingle, sowing handfuls of salt over my shoulder into the furrows that I had made, raving all the while. This lieutenant was suspicious. Already I was famous for my cunning. Before I understood what he was doing, he had grabbed the baby, run forward, and put it in front of the plough. When I saw what he had done, I knew he had outwitted me. If I were to continue my pretense of madness, I would have to cut the baby in half with the blade of the plough. I had to admit that I was sane. I mustered an army from among my subjects, and I joined the great host that laid siege to the walls of Troy. All of us went a little mad during the war, what with the betrayals and the intrigues, the interventions of immortals, and the stupid petty arguments amongst ourselves. My ship was crammed with precious things when I set for sail at home. As we voyaged, in my mind's eye, I could see the hero's welcome I would receive when I reached rocky Ithaca. I could almost see the streets of my land lined with my people cheering. I could see myself stepping over the threshold of feasting hall to find my beloved wife. My son would be a 10-year-old boy now. I could see the pride in the eyes of the father. I could almost feel my mother's warm embrace. Okay, and that is the end of our first chapter, year 5. Okay, so hopefully you read that along with me. I apologize if I didn't quite keep up with the pages at times. So now what I want you to do, so now you've read the chapter, I just want you to have a little think. Who do we think that this character is? Now, we've looked at this picture again. So who do we think the character is, and what do we think they are doing in the picture? Okay, so just have a little think yourself. Okay, so you should have had a little think to yourself now, and we're going to have a look and move on. So, of course, it's about Penelope. So we're going to focus on Penelope as a character, that the husband, or sorry, the wife to Odysseus. So what do we know about Penelope? Just have a little think to yourselves. What sort of character is she? How would she have coped with the trials over the 19 years she had to put up with the suitors? So how would she have coped with the suitors trying to ask for a hand in marriage? How do you think she coped with all that over the 19 years when Odysseus was away? Okay, so just have a little think, please. And now what I would like to do, I'd like to draw a picture of Penelope. So here, obviously, this is Penelope. And what she's doing here, she is in fact at her loom. Now, I mentioned this at the beginning. And what we mean by a loom is kind of like a sewing machine kind of thing. So I want you to draw a picture of Penelope. So this can either be at her loom, like it's done here, maybe her looking out to sea, waiting for Odysseus, or her with the suitors, the people who were trying to ask for her hand in marriage. And I want you to draw this picture and then annotate it. So I want you to draw little lines off your drawing and label what's happening in the picture. So you might label Penelope, label the loom perhaps, label different suitors if they were in there. Okay, so that kind of thing. So you're labeling it. And then at the bottom of your picture, I want you to add a small caption. So this caption is just something that describes what's happening in the picture. So that's all I want you to do. Describe what's happening in the picture at the bottom, just a line or two, and who the character is in the pictures, or the characters, who they are and what's happening. Okay, so that's what I would like you to do for me today, year 5. Okay, and then once you've done that, that is the end of today's English lesson. So I'll see you later for our maths. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest